She does not hold back. Ever. Better than food, man. Good Sunday morning, everyone. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. Great to see you as usual. I'm your host, Cliff Sargent. Let's talk about some poetry. Break, Blow, Burn is a collection of 43 poems coupled with essays by the American writer Camille Paglia. The title is taken from the religious poet John Donne's Holy Sonnet number 14, which I'll discuss later. But first, Camille Paglia, disagreeable, highly opinionated, ferociously passionate about literature, art, cinema, culture, life itself. She's like this miniature burning sun, you know? She's just this personality that is just constantly exuding like violent amounts of energy in every direction. And I just can't, I think she's great. Tough as nails, the kind of writer you can trust to back you up in a bar fight. Camille is a viciously confident American academic, cultural critic, and professor who writes for the general reader. She does not hold back. Ever. She is 1 in 7 billion. She's famous for her book Sexual Personae, Art and Decadence from Nefertiti to Emily Dickinson, which, from what I understand, took a long time to publish. I still haven't read it. I need to. Looks incredible. Check it out. She said it was a risk to write a book like Break, Blow, Burn. As she said, her publishers would much rather have her write some sort of manifesto or politically focused book. Instead, she said that I just felt I should use whatever name recognition I have won over the last 15 years or so in the cause of something for the arts. I wanted to write something to try to interest general readers again in poetry. And that's what this book is designed to do. It's designed to be an introduction to some of the greatest poets for people who just don't know anything about poetry, who, you know, like myself. I am completely clueless when it comes to poetry. I'm so inexperienced. I have I've read Paradise Lost. I haven't read The Inferno. I know. I've read poetry, but I don't know how to read it, you know. I don't know the context. I don't know the different movements. I'm not educated in that respect. So for me, this book was tremendous. It was an excellent introduction to so many incredible poems. And I never would have, you know, you read them first. And so I would do this. I would just read the poem and be like, well, okay. Then you get to her essays, which are, you know, a couple pages or so for each one. And you're just like, I cannot believe the amount of depth in these lines, and or I cannot believe what I'm missing. I cannot believe what I'm not getting out of these lines. It's incredible. The book took her 5 years to write, and it became a national bestseller. Each poem is given its own page. They're very tastefully presented. The blank space is the silence. Like, you know, a poem will have its own page and it'll keep going and it'll continue on to the next, but when it stops, the rest of the page is blank, right? Because it's isolating each of these pieces to give them respect, as she talks about, for the genius that created them. You know, they have their own place, and you're allowed to appreciate them without like the next one starting immediately and just like continuing like in these giant readers of poetry that they give students, which she questions the efficacy of introducing people to poetry with those giant fuck off books full of classic poetry where you're just like, Jesus God, I'm gonna be 65 before I finish this damn thing, and you just don't even touch it. And so I mean, it's no wonder, you know, people aren't into poetry, or that poetry has sort of lost its appeal. So obviously, you know, so many of us, even if we're not experienced with poetry, we know there's that it's not bullshit. We know there's something profound to it. We know it's important. We know poetry is important. But how do you access that? It seems so highbrow, I don't know, ivory tower. It seems so like locked away and relegated to the elite. So high culture that how could you just break in if you're just a person, if you're just like a normal guy or gal who wants to like read some poetry, and it's like, well, I want to get it. I want to feel like, you know, inspired. I want to feel the intensity behind these words that everybody's talking about, or like, I want to understand. I want to have my own opinion. I want to get my own perspective, have my own interpretation on this. It's like, well, how the hell do you do that? How the fuck do you do that in this culture of constant noise? This is a good start. This is a great start. It took 30 years for Paglia to develop a satisfactory interpretation of Coleridge's Kubla Khan, which is included in here. And that is just amazing. I'm not going to read from that one today because we're going to focus on the John Donne one, because the John Donne one is just so good, just incredible what she reveals in her essay about this poem. It's just astounding. But all the interpretations are simply her informed opinion. There is no definitive interpretation of poetry. I mean, that's sort of the beauty of it, but obviously you can have far more educated ones. And hers are, yeah, they're tremendous. They're awesome. So in here you're going to find Shakespeare, Wallace Stevens, Sylvia Plath, Emily Dickinson, William Carlos Williams, Paul Blackburn, John Donne, Walt Whitman, Yeats, and many more. Paglia's thoughts ignite like a torch, allowing you to see the stunning basilica that you've been standing in all along, but weren't aware of because it appeared that you were in total darkness. So if you're like me, the way in which you were introduced to poetry, if you were at all, was not good. You were given one of these enormous college readers that Paglia discusses in this interview I've linked to below, and told, like, get started, basically. There's nothing attractive about that. This book is designed to be attractive. It's designed to make you want to get into it, to read it, to appreciate it. It's not one of these giant texts crammed with masterpieces given no room to breathe on their own. And breathing room is so important with poetry. I've really come to realize that reading this book. You're introduced to such a broad range of poets and styles of poetry, and you're given insight into their historical context and relevance. And you quickly begin to appreciate the brilliant subtlety of poetry. Again, just how much can be communicated in so few words, spaced in a certain way. The book also illustrates the diversity and complexity of the form. You can see how they all look so different on the page. She effectively communicates the intensity of these poems, which has been lost on my generation and others. She is helping to keep this part of literature alive. And it seems like it's in real danger. Poetry is not popular. It used to be very popular. In her own words, this book is for the general audience, not those ensconced in universities or the academy or the ivory tower again, whatever. Poetry is a dying ember, but Paglia is fanning the flames. Sometimes it's like she's kicking off the lid of the gasoline and throwing it on, and it's rising to this roaring, scorching, beautiful inferno. She's really going for it in this one, and it just seems like she's put in a tremendous amount of effort, and I really, I don't know, I'm very grateful. I really appreciate it. We're lucky to have minds like her, and we're not going to have them forever, I think people at her level of thought are just a dying breed, or what it seems like to me, but yeah, maybe that's the glass half empty sort of outlook. I should be more of an optimist, but I don't know. There is so much in here to learn, not only about poetry, but people, culture, right? Our history. Every poet in here is interesting. My favorites out of her 43 chosen poems were Ozymandias by Shelley, Song of Myself by Whitman, Kubla Khan by Coleridge, Disillusionment of 10 O'Clock by Wallace Stevens, A Mexican Guitar by Frank O'Hara. I really like that one, and I would have talked about that one, but the Donne one was just so intense. And I loved the Donne, of course. And The Once Over by Paul Blackburn, which is about a beautiful woman who gets on a train in New York, and about all the people in the car with her and the effect she's having on them. And that is such a brilliant poem. Yeah. There's so much good stuff in here. So much good stuff. And I need to reread it. I mean, there are so many ideas from Paglia, and they go off in all these different directions, and they reference all these different people and places and context and things and moments in history and like all these different parts of culture. And it's like, and then you like listen to her in the interviews, and she's like super passionate and like fiery about it, and you're like, yeah, poetry, fuck yeah. It's like, who can do that? I mean, it's like, you like literary life coaches or something to like get you like super motivated to go read some poetry. And it's like, well, hopefully, what I'd like to achieve with this is that I inspire you not only to read the book, but I inspire some of you to really write some bad poetry, but then hopefully that'll turn into good poetry. Because, that would be a shame to lose all of this. It would be a shame to totally lose poetry, I think. Shame is an understatement. How about catastrophe? Historical catastrophe. That's probably about right. But the most impressive to me, perhaps the most intense revelation of what can be done in a poem, and the most shocking mixture of sex and religion was John Donne's Holy Sonnet number 14. I'm going to read the whole thing, and it'll give you a feel for the structure of the book. First comes the poem, then a couple pages of Paglia's thoughts and interpretations. Batter my heart, three-personed God, for you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend, that I may rise and stand, o'erthrow me, and bend your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. I, like an usurped town to another do, labor to admit you, but oh, to no end. Reason, your viceroy in me should defend, but is captived, and proves weak or untrue. Yet dearly I love you, and would be loved fain, but am betrothed unto your enemy. Divorce me, untie, or break that knot again. Take me to you, imprison me, for I, except you enthrall me, never shall be free, nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. So that was Holy Sonnet number 14 by John Donne. Now here's Paglia. In Renaissance and Baroque art, sex and religion are often startlingly intertwined. The source of this motif was the Old Testament's Song of Songs, admired by mystics like Saint Teresa of Avila, the great Spanish Carmelite reformer shown in ecstasy in a famous Bernini sculpture. The Ecstasy of Saint Teresa, if you haven't seen that, just check it out. Just look at everything by Bernini. He's incredible. The Song of Songs consists of canticles of sensuous Hebrew love poetry, interpreted by Christian theologians as an allegory of the bridegroom Jesus knocking at the door of the female soul. The Petrarchan sonnet was rarely as sexually explicit as Donne makes it in Holy Sonnet 14, where he portrays himself, or rather his heart, as a kidnapped virgin crying out for a virile liberator. The poem begins with the same brash imperative mood of Holy Sonnet 1, batter my heart, three-personed God. Strong action is needed to rescue the poet from sin. Of the three persons of the Trinity, God has thus far ineffectually acted only through the milder two. For you as yet but knock, breathe, shine, and seek to mend. Jesus too politely rapped on his bride's door, which must be broken down by the overwhelming power of God the Father, a warlike battering ram, rather than the tender Lamb of God. In the second line, Donne's door metaphor seamlessly blends into a new image, drawn from common objects of the workaday world, with which the poet as maker aligns himself. Such breaches of literary decorum in metaphysical poetry are historically analogous to Caravaggio's controversial painting, rejected by the patron of St. Matthew as a humble peasant with calloused feet. Jesus, the foster child of a Nazareth carpenter, has become a craftsman, a silversmith or kettle maker to whom a broken pot, the poet's heart, is brought for repair. Still hoping to mend or patch it, the smith tests the vessel's strength by knocking and tapping all around it to hear where the metal has worn thin. The breath with which he mists it before polishing, the final stage in writing too, is the third person of the Trinity, the Holy Spirit, or breath of life, with which God infused the dust to create Adam. The old pot's buffed up shine is the sun as the true light. For deliverance from life's thronging temptations, however, Donne needs radical, even violent aid. Bend, your force to break, blow, burn, and make me new. The soul vessel must be hacked to pieces and melted down over high heat to purge its impurities. The aggressive alliteration, a barrage of explosive B sounds, makes us feel the trauma of destruction before rebirth. There are sexual innuendos in Make Me New and also in That I May Rise and Stand, O'erthrow Me, a paradox conflating erection with resurrection. I had to laugh. Spiritual victory strangely requires defeat by God, since man is too weak to achieve redemption on his own. A higher self must be forged from the wreckage of his old identity. The main metaphor of the sonnet's first quatrain is the heart as a leaky pot. That of the second quatrain is the heart as a citadel under siege. I, like an usurped town, to another do. A king, the rightful ruler, is away, and has left a viceroy, literally vice-king, compare vice-president, as the town's steward and defender. But the viceroy, identified with reason, is captured, and has buckled under pressure. Coward or traitor, he proves weak or untrue. He has surrendered the town to the enemy. It's an allegorical saga. Returning to heaven after creating mankind, God the King left reason, the divine spark distinguishing us from animals, as his viceroy. In other words, logic should be enough to persuade us to avoid sin. But human intellect is weak and easily duped by Satan, who cleverly infiltrates the heart and hardens it to God's grace. Dante makes a similar point in the Divine Comedy. Virgil, the epic poet, who symbolizes reason and language, can lead Dante only so far. At the gates of paradise, the beautiful Beatrice, symbolizing faith, takes over as tour guide in the ascent to truth. Holy Sonnet 14 fuses politics and romance. Donne's soul is a maiden to another due, that is, promised to God. But she has been coerced and betrothed to the invader, as if she were Persephone carried off by the Prince of Hell. Like a loyalist resistance fighter, she struggles vainly to open the city gates to the true king. I labor to admit you, but oh, to no end. All she can do is swear her love for God and assure him she would gladly, fain, be loved by him in turn. The heroine's emotions accelerate in a torrent of imperatives and paradoxes. She longs to be divorced and cut off from the vile usurper so that she can be safely sequestered or even jailed, in prison, by her lord. By projecting himself into female anguish, victimization, and bondage, break that knot, the poet is playing with transsexual and homoerotic effects. Most of his contemporaries, however, would probably have understood the poem as simply a provocative fantasia on the popular Renaissance theme of sacred and profane love. True freedom, Donne asserts, comes only through servitude to God, in philosophical terms, the good. He appeals to God to enthrall him, a verb meaning to enamor or entrance, but also to subjugate. A thrall was a medieval slave or serf. The city of the heart, prefiguring the New Jerusalem, must be destroyed in order to save it. The brutal paradox of Donne's last line still stuns. Nor ever chaste, except you ravish me. We will never be pure until we are abducted and raped by God. A little bit of light reading after the Sunday service. Camille Paglia is an atheist, by the way, but she is fascinated by and respects religion as, this monumental force in human history. So who should read the book? Anyone who has read a poem by Shakespeare, Wallace Stevens, Yeats, and just been completely lost. Totally clueless. These are short poems. It's educational. It's for newbies. Again, after reading it, you realize just how much can be contained in so little. You begin to realize there are so many different ways you can think about a poem, and that's the beautiful thing. But there are definitely more sophisticated interpretations than others. Deep reading, that's what Camille Paglia is all about. She's a huge proponent of deep reading, like really getting in there and understanding and thinking about what you're reading and having an informed opinion about it and how it relates to culture and what's come before. And I am so grateful for her taking the time to write this book. It is so valuable for us to get access to her mind's encyclopedia pertaining to these poems. So I heavily suggest you begin immediately, if just to have a new understanding of the poems in this book, because they're terrific poems, they're famous poems. It has the power to change the way you think about poetry, so that's incredibly valuable. Break, blow, burn. Better than food. Loved it. Now who's going to get it for the coffee lottery? Coffee lottery, for those of you who are new, is where I take all of the names of the patrons on Patreon who have donated $5 or more per video to the show, and I place them in this mason jar, and I pull out a name for each review. Whoever's name I pull out, I send them a hard copy of the book I'm reviewing, plus a bag of coffee I roast myself. So, thank you very much to all the patrons who have donated to the show so far. It really means the world to me. You're making all of this possible. If you would like to get in on that, you can head to the description box below or go to patreon.com/books are better than food. Please subscribe if you have not already. A like on Facebook would also be greatly appreciated, and you can also find me on Twitter or Instagram. Thank you very much to all the patrons who have donated to the show. You're making this all possible, and I hope you know how much I sincerely appreciate it. Thank you very much. All right, that's enough. Who's going to get it? Oh, Thomas. Thomas is going to get Break, Blow, Burn by Camille Paglia and some delicious coffee. You could also support the show by picking up one of these awesome mugs designed by my friend. And I'll put a link for that in the description box below as well. It's always there to remind you of what I always like to say, which is die reading. All right. Thank you so much for watching. Take care of yourselves. Have a good night. I'll talk to you soon. Go read some poetry. Ciao.